Have you ever been reading an online discussion and it just feels like everybody's talking past each other?
Oh, yeah,
Like
totally.
you can't even tell who's making a good point or if it's just a bunch of noise.
It's so hard to follow sometimes, right?
It really
Like,
is.
what are we even doing here?
Exactly. And so today we're going to try to get to the bottom of that.
Yes, we are.
We're going to deep dive into this idea of dialogic argumentation.
Ooh, that sounds fancy.
It does sound very academic, but really it's just about how we figure things out online.
Right. It's like, okay, how do we actually have these online debates and actually learn something?
Exactly. And this is especially important when we're trying to understand complex ideas,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, when it's not just like a yes or no kind of
You're
question.
right, exactly. And it's also about how we can get better at thinking critically.
Yeah, and explaining or reasoning and all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, to make this more concrete, we're going to be looking at a short but really interesting example.
Oh, I love a good example.
I know, me too. It really helps bring things to life.
To
So, this example is about two students, Fran and Amy, and they're discussing this scientific concept of thermal equilibrium.
Also, like, are things in a room eventually the same temperature?
Exactly. And so Fran believes that objects in the same room can actually stay at different temperatures.
Okay, interesting. Why does she think that?
She thinks that because some materials are better at conducting heat than others.
Oh, I see. So like a metal spoon versus a wooden spoon.
Exactly. And Amy initially disagrees with Fran.
Okay, she thinks everything will eventually reach the same temperature.
Right. She believes that conductivity only affects how fast something reaches room temperature.
So it's a disagreement about the role of conductivity in this whole thermal equilibrium thing.
That's it. And it might seem simple, but it actually gives us a really fascinating window into how researchers actually analyze online conversations.
Oh, so it's like a microcosm of a bigger phenomenon.
Exactly. And our goal today is to explore all the different ways these experts evaluate online arguments.
Like, what are the different lenses they're using to make sense of this stuff?
Exactly. We want to give you a framework for really understanding what's going on in all those online discussions you come across in your daily life.
So we can be more informed participants and maybe even win some arguments.
Well, win or lose, at least be able to follow what's going on and understand the different perspectives.
Right, exactly. Because sometimes it feels like everybody's speaking a different language.
It totally does. And for this deep dive, we're going to be drawing on some really insightful research.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's actually a whole bunch of research on something called analytic frameworks for assessing dialogic argumentation in online learning environments.
Wow, that is a mouthful.
It is, but it's basically about how we can understand and evaluate online arguments in places where people are trying to learn.
Gotcha. So not just like arguing on Twitter for fun.
Right, more about how we can actually use argumentation to learn and grow.
Makes sense.
So this research has actually identified 5 main categories or lenses for examining online arguments.
Okay, 5 lenses. Let's hear them.
So first, we're going to look at the formal structure of an argument.
So like the nuts and bolts, the basic building blocks.
Exactly. And then we'll consider the conceptual quality of the arguments themselves.
Okay, so like how sound are the ideas? Is it good science? Is it good history? Whatever it is.
That's it. And then we'll explore the nature and function of each person's contribution to the conversation.
So what role does each comment play? Like, are they
Mhm.
clarifying? Are they disagreeing? Are they adding something new?
Exactly. And then we'll delve into the epistemic nature of reasoning.
Uh-oh, another fancy word.
I know, but don't worry. It's just about the types of reasoning that people are using to support their claims.
So like, are they using evidence or are they just appealing to emotion or something?
Right. Are they using analogies? Are they using examples? Things like that.
Okay, that makes sense.
And finally, we're going to zoom out and look at argumentation sequences and interaction patterns.
So like the bigger picture of how arguments unfold over time.
Exactly, and how all the participants interact with each other during the discussion.
Cool. I'm excited to dive in.
Me too. Okay, so let's start with our first category, formal argumentation structure.
Nuts and bolts. Let's go.
This approach, as we said, is all about breaking down an argument into its different parts.
Like taking it apart and seeing how it ticks.
And one of the most fundamental ideas here is something called Tolman's argument pattern.
Tolman's argument pattern. Okay, I'm intrigued.
So back in the late 1950s, this guy, Stephen Tolman, he proposed that a typical argument actually has 6 key components.
6 components. Wow. Okay, I'm ready.
So first you have the claim, which is basically the main point you're trying to make.
Okay, so like in our example, Fran's claim is that objects in the same room can be different temperatures.
Exactly. And then you have the data, which is the evidence you use to support your claim.
So like Fran saying that Some objects are good conductors and some are bad conductors.
Right, that would be her data, and then there's the warrant.
The warrant, okay, what's that?
The warrant explains why your data actually supports your claim.
Oh, so it's like the connection between the evidence and the main point.
Exactly. So in Fran's case, her warrant is basically that good conductors let in more heat energy and bad conductors let in less, which is why she thinks objects in the same room can be different temperatures.
Oh, okay, so the warrant is like the underlying reasoning,
That's it. And then sometimes you need a qualifier.
a qualifier.
Yeah, this is basically a way of acknowledging that your claim might not always be true.
So like saying most of the time or under certain conditions.
Exactly. And then you have the backing, which provides additional support for your warrant.
So it's like evidence for your reasoning.
Right. And then finally, there's the rebuttal, which is where you address potential objections to your claim.
So like pointing out exceptions or saying why a counterargument might not be valid.
Exactly. Now, Toulmin was very clear that not all 6 of these components will always be present in every argument.
Right. It depends on the situation.
Exactly. And he also emphasized that what counts as good data or a strong warrant can vary depending on the field you're arguing in.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Like
Yeah.
what's convincing in a science class might not fly in a courtroom.
Totally. So let's see if we can map all of this onto our student example with Fran and Amy.
Okay, let's break it down.
So Fran starts off by saying, I think objects in the same room remain different temperatures because some objects are good conductors and some are bad.
Okay, so that's her
Okay.
claim right there, plain and simple.
Exactly. Objects in the same room remain different temperatures. That's the main point she's trying to make.
And then she goes on to say, this determines how much heat energy is allowed in and out of the object.
Right. So that part about conductors being good or bad, that feels like her data.
The evidence for her claim.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
also intertwined with her warrant, which is basically explaining why she thinks different conductivity leads to different temperatures.
Oh, I see. So the data and the warrant are kind of blended together in this case.
They are. And then Amy jumps in and says, I disagree. I think all objects in the same room are the same temperature.
Boom, there's the counterclaim, nice and clear.
And then she says, conductivity only determines how quickly an object will reach room temperature.
Okay, so that's Amy's warrant. She's explaining her reasoning for why she thinks everything reaches the same temperature eventually.
Exactly. And then Fran comes back with, no good conductors let in more heat energy than poor conductors, so objects that let in more heat will get hotter.
Ooh, she's coming in strong.
Yeah.
That sounds like a rebuttal to me.
It is. She's directly challenging Amy's warrant about conductivity only affecting the speed of heat transfer.
And then she gives an example. She says, for example, when I put a piece of metal and a piece of plastic in hot water, the metal was a higher temperature after 30 seconds.
Right, there's her data. She's using a specific example to support her rebuttal.
Trying to prove her point with a real-world observation.
Exactly. And then Amy, after considering this, she says, I guess you're right, maybe objects are different temperatures.
So she's shifting her claim based on Fran's argument.
She is, and if we analyze this whole exchange through Toulmin's lens, it's actually pretty interesting.
What do we see?
Well, we see that both Fran and Amy are presenting data and warrants to support their claims.
Right. They're not just making assertions. They're trying to back them up with evidence and reasoning.
Exactly. And they're also challenging each other's warrants, which is another sign of a good quality argument.
It shows they're really engaging with each other's ideas.
They are. So from Toulmin's perspective, this short conversation is actually a decent example of argumentation.
Not bad for a couple of students just chatting about science.
And it's actually worth mentioning that Toulmin's model has even been used to design online learning tools.
Oh, really? So it's not just a theoretical framework. It's actually being put into practice.
Exactly. So for example, there's this system called Belvedere, where students use concept maps based on Toulmin's ideas to build their explanations.
So it's like a visual way of mapping out the different parts of an argument.
Right. And then there are also some online discussion boards where students have to fill in separate boxes for their claims, their data, and their warrants before they can post their complete argument.
Oh, wow. So it forces them to really think through those different components.
It does, which can definitely help improve the quality of their arguments.
That's cool.
Now, our sources also discuss how Erdogan and her colleagues adapted Toulmin's ideas specifically for looking at dialogic argumentation in the classroom.
Oh, so it's like taking Tellman's model and tweaking it to better fit how students actually argue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the key distinctions they make is between the process of arguing and the content of the argument.
Okay, I think I see where this is going. So the process is like the actual back and forth of the conversation.
Right. It's the dynamics of the interaction.
And the content is the actual ideas being discussed like the scientific concepts or whatever.
That's it. So Erdogan and her team, they're really interested in the specific things students do with their words in each turn of an argument.
Like, what are the actions they're taking? Are they agreeing, disagreeing, clarifying, elaborating?
Exactly. And they pay particular attention to what happens when students disagree with each other.
Because that's where the real learning happens, right? When you have to defend your ideas.
Right. So they look for things like opposing a claim, adding more detail, which they call elaborating, providing more support, which is reinforcing, suggesting new ideas, which is advancing and making claims more nuanced, which is adding qualifications.
Oh, wow. So they're really breaking down the different moves people make in an argument.
They are, and they actually have a system for evaluating the quality of these disagreements, which they call oppositional episodes.
Oppositional episodes. I like that.
Yeah, and their system for judging these episodes is based on two main things.
Two main things. Let's hear them.
First, they say that a strong argument needs to have grounds.
Grounds.
Yeah, and this actually bundles together the data, the warrants, and the backing.
Oh, so it's like everything you're using to support your claim.
Exactly. The idea is that you need to have good reasons for what you believe.
Makes sense. You can't just make a claim out of thin air.
Right. And then second, arguments get stronger when they include rebuttals.
So you need to be able to address counter-arguments.
Exactly. And they say that the best rebuttals are the ones that directly challenge the grounds of the opposing claim.
So you're not just saying, no, you're wrong. You're actually picking apart the other person's reasoning.
Exactly. And this kind of back and forth is really valuable because it forces everyone to really examine the evidence and the logic behind the arguments.
It's like a crucible where ideas are tested and refined.
That's a great analogy. So let's see how our little Fran and Amy exchange stacks up against Erdogan's framework.
Okay, let's apply the lens.
So the four turns between Fran and Amy would be considered one oppositional episode.
Okay, one episode. And how would they score on the quality scale?
Well, according to Erdogan's scale, it would probably be a level 4.
A level 4 out of what?
They have a 5-level scale, so a 4 is pretty good.
Okay, not perfect, but pretty good. Why a 4?
Well, it gets a 4 because there's a clear rebuttal from Fran when she makes her second statement and brings up the hot water example.
Right, she's directly challenging the reasoning behind Amy's initial idea.
Exactly. So similar to how Tolman's model views it, Erdogan's adaptation also suggests that this short conversation shows some pretty good argumentation.
At least in terms of how it's structured, even though, as we know, the conclusion isn't scientifically accurate.
Right, which is an important point to keep in mind, but we'll come back to that.
Okay, sounds good.
So what are the main advantages and disadvantages of these formal structure frameworks?
What do we gain and what do we lose by looking at arguments this way?
Right, so one big advantage of Tolman's approach is that it can be used to analyze arguments in pretty much any field.
Yeah, it's a very versatile tool.
It is, and Erdogan's framework builds on that and is specifically designed for looking at how arguments unfold in real-time dialogue.
So it's more fine-grained analysis of the back and forth.
Exactly, and for teachers, these frameworks can be really useful for showing students how to build well-structured arguments.
Yeah, giving them the tools to create solid arguments.
Right, but there are also some challenges.
There always are.
So sometimes it can be difficult to clearly separate the data, the warrants, and the backing in a real conversation.
Oh yeah, it can all get jumbled up, especially when people are talking.
It can, and even the researchers who develop these frameworks acknowledge that.
So it's not a perfect system.
And another limitation is that Tolman's original model doesn't really specify what counts as a good claim or a strong warrant in a specific subject area.
Oh yeah, like what's a good warrant in science might not be so good in history.
Exactly. So it's a framework that needs to be adapted to the specific context.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's move on to our second lens, conceptual quality.
Now we're talking about the ideas themselves.
We're moving beyond just the structure of the argument and looking at the actual content of what's being said.
So like in our example, we're going beyond just how Fran and Amy are arguing and actually evaluating the science itself.
Exactly. And Clark and Sampson have developed a really useful framework for doing just that.
Okay, Clark and Sampson, let's hear it.
So they designed their framework specifically for analyzing arguments, where the goal is to reach agreement on explanations for natural phenomena.
So it's really geared toward scientific argumentation.
It is. They're less interested in, say, debates about ethics or politics.
More about the world around us.
Exactly. And they often set up online discussions where they deliberately group students who have different initial ideas about a science topic.
Oh, interesting. So they're creating these clashing perspectives to spark a good debate.
Exactly. They want to see how those different ideas are presented, challenged, and ultimately resolved.
Sounds like a recipe for learning.
It is. So how do they then judge the quality of these arguments?
Yeah, what are they looking for?
Well, they look at each turn in the conversation and they code it in three ways.
3 ways. Okay, I'm listening.
So first, they consider the nature of the contribution.
So, like, is it a claim, a rebuttal, a question, a piece of evidence?
Exactly. And then second, they look at the quality of the grounds.
Okay, so that's like, how strong is the evidence or the reasoning behind the claim?
Right. Is the data reliable? Is the warrant logical? Things like that.
Gotcha.
And then third, they assess the conceptual quality.
So that's like how accurate or sophisticated is the scientific understanding being shown?
That's it. Are they using the right concepts? Are they making appropriate connections?
Okay, so it's not just about whether they're arguing well, it's about whether they're understanding the science correctly.
Exactly. And all of these codes then come together to give an overall score for how well structured the argument episode is.
So it's a holistic assessment that takes into account both the form and the content of the argument.
It is, and they pay particular attention to whether there are rebuttals, especially those that challenge the reasons behind a claim.
So again, it's about that back and forth where ideas are really tested.
Right, so let's try to apply all of this to our Fran and Amy example.
Okay, I'm ready to put on my Clark and Sampson hat.
So using their framework, Fran's first statement would be considered a claim,
Okay, that's straightforward.
but they would probably say it has a low conceptual quality.
Because her understanding of heat transfer isn't quite accurate.
Exactly. And then her explanation about good and bad conductors would be the grounds for her claim.
Okay, so the grounds are there, but they're not super strong scientifically.
Right. Then Amy's disagreement would be seen as a rebuttal to Fran's claim.
Okay, that makes sense.
And because she's showing a more nuanced understanding of conductivity, they would say her contribution has higher conceptual quality.
So Amy's got the better science in this case.
She does, and her explanation about how conductivity affects the rate of heat transfer, that would be her grounds.
Okay, so Amy's got good grounds and good conceptual quality.
So far, so good. And then Fran's second statement, with the hot water example, that would be considered a rebuttal against Amy's grounds.
Okay, so she's challenging Amy's reasoning.
She is, but again, Clark and Sampson would probably say it has low conceptual quality.
Because the example itself is a bit misleading, right?
It is, it's not a great demonstration of thermal equilibrium.
And finally, Amy agrees with Fran and changes her claim.
Right. And that final move would be seen as having low conceptual quality and not really offering any grounds.
So it's like she's giving up without really providing any further evidence or reasoning.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weak ending.
So what's the overall verdict from Clark and Sampson's perspective?
Well, they would likely say that this exchange has high structural quality, meaning there's a good back and forth with multiple challenges.
So the form of the argument is good.
But they would also say that it's weak in terms of conceptual quality.
The science itself is shaky.
And this is actually a really crucial point because it shows that you can have a debate that looks good in terms of its structure, but the actual ideas being discussed might be flawed.
Oh yeah, that's a dangerous combination.
It is, and in this case, Fran actually uses a somewhat misleading example to persuade Amy away from a more scientifically accurate explanation.
So even though the argument is well structured, it leads to the wrong conclusion.
Exactly, and it makes you wonder how often we see this happening online.
Right? People getting swayed by arguments that sound good, but are actually based on faulty logic or evidence.
It's definitely something to be aware of.
For sure.
Now, our sources also mention Kuhn and Udell's framework in this category of conceptual quality.
Okay, another perspective on the ideas themselves.
So what's their take?
Well, Kuhn and Udell are particularly interested in how people's argumentation skills and their understanding of the topic develop over time.
So they're looking at the learning process that's happening during the discussion.
Exactly. And their framework focuses on assessing the conceptual quality of individual arguments. And they have this whole hierarchy for classifying them.
A hierarchy, interesting. Tell me more.
So at the lowest level, they have arguments that don't really offer any justification. It's just like stating an opinion without any backing.
Right. And then a step up from that are arguments that focus on less important aspects of the issue.
So maybe they're touching on the topic, but not really getting to the heart of it.
Exactly. And then at the highest level are arguments that really address the core of the problem.
So they're engaging with the most relevant and important ideas.
And the interesting thing is that they actually developed specific examples of pro and con arguments at each level of this hierarchy.
Oh, wow. So they have concrete illustrations of what each level looks like.
They do, and they did this for the specific topic they were studying, which was capital punishment.
Okay, so their examples are all about arguments for and against the death penalty.
Exactly. So it's a very context-specific framework.
Gotcha. But the general idea of the hierarchy could be applied to other topics too.
Absolutely. It's about how sophisticated and how relevant the arguments are to the central issue.
Right, and how well they address the key points.
Now, Kuhn and Udell also have a separate way of looking at the different types of moves people make in a discussion.
Okay, so it's not just about the quality of the ideas, it's also about the actions people are taking?
That's it. So they
Oh,
have
yeah.
these categories like exposition, which is basically explaining an idea.
Just laying out the information.
Then there's challenge, which is where someone disagrees or offers a counter argument.
So that's where things start to heat up.
And then there are requests, which are basically questions.
Asking for clarification or more information.
And then they have a catch-all category for other kinds of moves.
So everything else that doesn't fit into those neat boxes?
And they believe that as people get better at arguing, you should see more of those challenge moves and fewer moves that are just about explaining things.
So the discussion becomes more critical and less about just stating facts.
Exactly. So let's apply this to our Fran and Amy example.
Okay, back to the students.
Using Kuhn and Udell's framework, both Fran and Amy's arguments would probably be considered functional in terms of conceptual quality.
Okay, so they're not at the highest level, but they're not at the lowest either.
Right. They're somewhere in the middle because they are both trying to address the core ideas around thermal equilibrium.
Even though Fran's understanding isn't entirely accurate.
Right. But at least they're both engaging with the main concepts.
And what about the types of moves they make?
Well, their exchange definitely emphasizes challenge moves, with Amy disagreeing initially and Fran offering a counterexample.
So they're pushing each other to think more deeply.
They are, and this aligns with Kuhn and Udell's idea that more challenge moves indicate a higher level of argumentation skill.
Gotcha. So what are the overall strengths and weaknesses of these frameworks that focus on conceptual quality?
Well, a major advantage is that they help us understand how people make sense of information online and decide which ideas to trust.
So it's not just about the structure of the argument, it's about the validity of the ideas themselves.
Exactly, and this is crucial for evaluating the trustworthiness of online information.
Especially in this age of misinformation.
Exactly. But a significant challenge with these frameworks is that the way you judge conceptual quality often depends heavily on the specific topic being discussed.
Oh yeah, a rubric for evaluating arguments about thermal equilibrium wouldn't necessarily work for evaluating arguments about history or literature.
Right, you'd need different criteria for different subjects.
And another challenge is that understanding often evolves and changes during a discussion.
So just looking at the arguments at the beginning and the end might not capture the full picture of how someone's thinking has developed.
Right, you need to look at the whole trajectory of the conversation.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to our third category, nature and functions of contributions within the dialogue.
Okay, now we're looking at the role of each comment in the conversation.
We're shifting our focus from the structure and the content of the arguments to the specific function that each person's contribution plays.
So it's like analyzing the conversational moves people are making.
Exactly. And DeVries and her colleagues have developed a framework that's really helpful for understanding this.
Okay, Freeze, tell me more.
So they're interested in promoting what they call epistemic dialogue.
Epistemic dialogue. That sounds interesting.
It's basically about encouraging online discussions that really dig into the underlying knowledge and concepts when people are working together to solve problems.
So it's not just about arguing for the sake of arguing, it's about using dialogue to build understanding.
Exactly. They want to see people explaining things, justifying their ideas, and really engaging with each other's perspectives.
And they actually created a whole online environment to try and foster this kind of dialogue, right?
Did. It's called Connect.
Connect. Cool name.
And it's basically a platform that combines real-time communication with prompts to guide the interaction and tools that show students how they're contributing to the discussion.
So it's like a structured environment that encourages this deep collaborative learning.
It is, and they have this whole list of categories for coding what students say during these interactions.
A whole list. Wow. Okay, I'm ready.
So some of the categories include things like suggesting a thesis, attacking an idea, defending a point, conceding a point, compromising, stating an outcome, explaining something, and making an argument.
So they're covering a wide range of conversational moves.
They're trying to capture the full spectrum of how people engage with each other during these epistemic dialogues.
So how would our little Fran and Amy exchange be categorized using this framework?
Well, from DeVries et al.'s perspective, everything they say could be classified as either explanation or argumentation.
Okay, so they're either explaining their ideas or arguing for their positions.
Exactly. So Fran starts by explaining her initial idea about conductivity.
Right. Laying out her understanding of how heat works.
And then Amy presents a counter-argument.
Challenging Fran's claim.
Then Fran defends her position with an example.
The hot water experiment.
And finally, Amy eventually agrees with Fran.
So it's a back and forth of explanations and arguments.
It is, and because DeVries and her colleagues see both explanation and argumentation as valuable ways for students to build understanding together, they would actually view this short example as a positive example of epistemic discourse.
Interesting. So even though they end up with a scientifically inaccurate conclusion, the fact that they're engaging in this back and forth is seen as a good thing.
It is, from this perspective, it's about the process of collaboration and knowledge construction more than the specific outcome.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now, Jansen and colleagues also have a framework in this category that focuses on what they call argumentative dialogue acts.
Argumentative dialogue acts. Okay, break it down for me.
So Jansen and her team, they've developed a system that can actually automatically identify the purpose of each statement that students type during online group work.
Automatically. So it's like a computer program that can analyze the conversation.
Exactly. They use a program called MAPE to do this.
MAPE. Okay, I'll remember that.
And they have 5 main categories for the different kinds of things people do when they communicate.
5 categories. Okay, let's hear them.
So first, there's making an argument.
Putting forward a claim and supporting it.
Right. Then there's responding to someone.
Like agreeing, disagreeing, or acknowledging a point.
Then there's giving information.
Just sharing facts or explaining something.
And then there's asking for something.
Like requesting clarification or more information.
And finally, there's telling someone to do something.
Giving instructions or making a demand.
Exactly. Now, within that making an argument category, they actually have more specific subcategories, which they call dialogue acts.
Okay, so it's like breaking down the different ways you can make an argument.
Exactly. So some of these dialogue acts include things like giving a reason, stating a conclusion, making a counter-argument, and so on.
So they're really getting into the nitty-gritty of how people construct arguments.
They are, and they've used this automated approach to study all sorts of online interactions.
Cool. So they're not just limited to our little Fran and Amy example.
Right. One of the things they've looked at is how students work together online to write essays based on historical documents.
So they're using MIPA to analyze these complex collaborative writing tasks.
Exactly. And it's a really powerful tool because it allows them to analyze huge amounts of data.
Yeah, much more than you could do by hand.
So let's see how MIPA would analyze our Fran and Amy exchange.
Okay, I'm curious to see what the computer says.
So Fran's first statement would probably be coded as giving information, followed by giving a reason and stating a conclusion.
Okay, so she's laying out her understanding of conductivity and then drawing a conclusion based on that.
Right. And then Amy's disagreement would be coded as making a counter-argument.
Directly challenging Fran's claim.
And her explanation about how conductivity affects the rate of heat transfer would be coded as giving a reason.
Supporting her counter-argument.
Then Fran's second turn, where she disagrees with Amy and restates her conclusion, that would be coded as responding to Amy and making an argument.
Okay, so she's both reacting to Amy's point and reiterating her own position.
Exactly. And her hot water example would be coded as giving a reason.
Trying to provide evidence for her claim.
And finally, Amy's, I guess you're right, would be coded as confirming Fran's point.
Accepting the argument.
Exactly. And based on all these codes, MIPA can actually identify different patterns in the argumentation.
So it's not just coding each statement in isolation. It's looking at the bigger picture of how the conversation unfolds.
Exactly. And in this case, MIPA would likely see Fran and Amy's exchange as a good example of what they call an extend sequence of argumentation.
Extent? Okay, what does that mean?
Basically, it means that the argument is building on itself with each person adding new information or perspectives.
So it's not just a repetitive back and forth, it's actually moving the conversation forward.
Right. And MEMSO sees this as a positive pattern because it indicates that the participants are engaging with each other's ideas and trying to develop a shared understanding.
Gotcha.
Now, the last framework we're going to discuss in this category is Baker and colleagues' Rainbow Framework.
The Rainbow Framework, I love it.
It's a great name, and it's actually a really useful tool for analyzing online discussions in educational settings.
Okay, tell me more about the rainbow.
So Baker and his team, they developed this framework to look at the different kinds of contributions students make to these discussions and how those contributions help them deepen their understanding.
So it's about how we use online discussions to learn and grow.
Exactly. And their framework has 7 main categories.
7 categories? That's a lot. What are they?
Well, some of the key categories are things like sharing opinions, making arguments, asking questions, and clarifying information.
Okay, those all make sense in the context of a discussion.
Right. And then there's this really important category called explore and deepen.
Explore and deepen. I like that.
This category is all about those moments in a discussion where people really connect the arguments and counterarguments and explore what they mean.
So it's like going beyond the surface level and really digging into the ideas.
Exactly. And Baker and his colleagues, they believe that these explore and deepen moments are really crucial for learning.
Because that's where the real insights happen, when you start to connect the dots and see the bigger picture.
Right. And they've used this framework to analyze a lot of different online discussions.
Not just Fran and Amy.
Right. They've used it in online environments where students are working together on shared documents and diagrams.
So it's applicable to a wide range of collaborative learning activities.
It is. And so when we'll look at Fran and Amy through this rainbow lens, their exchange actually fits really well into that explore and deepen category.
Really, even though it's just a short conversation.
It does, because they're both exploring the concept of thermal equilibrium by putting forward their ideas and challenging each other.
So even